Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we could call the meeting to order, and thank you all very much for coming to the January board meeting, the inaugural board meeting of 2018 of the Toronto Police Services Board. Let me start by asking my colleagues if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. No, hearing none, thank you. As everybody knows, or I think everybody knows, the first meeting of the year, we have an election for the chair and the vice chair. Before we do that, however, there is a deputation about it, and we should hear from that first, and then I'll turn to the board's Chief Minister, Caroline Bennett, to take us through those proceedings. So the deputation is Derek Moran. Derek, you're going to have 5 minutes.
Found out that Brenda Ross over there does not know that this Police Services Board has a code of conduct, and I was going to read off a few of the sections. Ontario Regulation 421/97, members of Police Services Board code of conduct for whoever is about to be elected chair or vice chair. We can't take anything for granted. Section 7 says, board members shall discharge their duties loyally, faithfully, impartially, and according to the Act, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw as provided in their oath or affirmation of office. Section 8 says board members shall uphold the letter and spirit of the code of conduct set out in this regulation and shall discharge their duties in a manner that will inspire public confidence in the abilities and integrity of the board. Section 13, board members shall refrain from engaging in conduct that would discredit or compromise the integrity of the board or the police force. Now, in the Dictionary of Canadian Law, just so everyone knows, integrity is defined as soundness of moral principles, probity, honesty, and uprightness. So before you all go off and automatically re-elect Andrew Pringle to be the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board, I just wanted to take some time to reflect upon how things have changed here at the board this past year or so under Chair Pringle's watch. Now, Councillor Crawford at the budget consultation show trial held last week at City Hall, even Meritori at the last executive committee, letting people speak for others who couldn't make it. I believe that also used to be the case here. Now, the current chair has to turn to a lawyer in order to get their permission first, apparently, in order to let what was actually both Miguel and I speak on behalf of Chris Langenfeld. Now, to make sure something like this doesn't happen again, and it's too bad he's not here, I was expecting him to be here, by what authority does Carl the lawyer dare tell Miguel that he can't speak on behalf of Chris Langenfeld? No, does anyone want to tell me what authority he has to tell
You're
Miguel?
giving us input, remember? Just keep going. Your time is ticking, Derek.
Objection. What you've just said is unacceptable, Chair Pringle, so here I'll make it simple for you. The proper answer is he doesn't. Carl the lawyer has absolutely no authority whatsoever to tell someone they can't speak for someone else who just couldn't happen to make the meeting for whatever reason. Barring any objections, of course, as in trust law, one must always give time for objections. Any objections? Going once? Any objections? Going twice? Last time? Any objections? That's 3 times. Let the record show that no one in attendance here made any objections to what I said, that Carl the lawyer has absolutely no authority whatsoever to tell someone that they can't speak for someone else who just couldn't happen to make the meeting for whatever reason. Now, also in the Dictionary of Canadian Law, define, ironically, is defined as to explain the meaning, to limit, to clarify. Because the bylaws here were amended on Chair Pringle's watch too, right? And bylaw here says bylaw means this bylaw as amended from time to time. That doesn't exactly do anything to explain, limit, clarify, or answer the question, what's a bylaw here at the Toronto Police Services Board, does it? Last couple of months ago, I was here from Bouvier's Law Dictionary, bylaws, rules, and ordinances made by a corporation for its own government. So we should probably go with that in the future. People can always tell when they're being scanned when government does
1
stuff
minute,
like that.
Derek.
People can always tell when they're being scanned when government does stuff like that and gives us definitions like this, because otherwise it would reveal too much and end up exposing the truth. In order to speak here, also, you have to get your name on the list by noon the day before the meeting. It wasn't always that way here, was it? Not only that, but see here, this is the Board of Health. That's Councillor Doucette here. Councillor Sarah Doucette here, 45 minutes after the meeting has started, is asking whether anyone else would still like to speak on the item being discussed. But your servants here at the Toronto Police Services Board won't allow you to speak unless you've signed up by 12 p.m. the day before their meeting, because apparently it takes 25 hours for them to print your name on a piece of paper. Now, anyone got a stopwatch? Watch this. DEREKMORAN. See how easy that was?
Thank you, Derek.
Okay.
Any questions, colleagues of Derek? Derek, thank you. Carlene, turn it over to you to go through the procedures.
Since this is the first meeting in the new year, and in accordance with subsection 28(1) of the Police Services Act, which provides that the board shall elect a chair at its first meeting in each year, nominations for the position of chair will now be accepted.
Yeah, I nominate Andy Pringle.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, nominations will be closed. Mr. Jeffers has nominated Mr. Pringle, which was seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There being only one nomination for the office of chair, Mr. Pringle is declared elected chair of the board for the year 2018 and until his successor is appointed. Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
The board will now elect the vice chair. In accordance with subsection 28(2) of the Police Services Act, the board will now elect vice chair. The vice chair shall act as the chair if the chair is absent or if the chair's position is vacant. Nominations for the position of vice chair will now be accepted.
I nominate Councillor Chin Lee.
Can I have a seconder? Okay. Does the candidate agree to be nominated? Do you agree to be nominated?
Thank you, I do.
Do you agree to be nominated? Okay. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, nominations will be closed. Board Member Molliner has nominated Councillor Lee, which was seconded by Councillor Carroll. All in favor? Opposed? There being only one nomination for the office of Vice Chair, Councillor Lee is declared elected Vice Chair of the Board for the year 2018 and until his successor is appointed. That's it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Tory has just joined us. I have an announcement I want to read first, but let me say also that Deputy Chief McLean is going to sit in for the chief, who is tied up on some external business. Let me start with something that's been posted on the services website as of January the 12th, but just I think it is important to draw to everybody's attention as well in this meeting. And that is as part of the modernization process that the Toronto Police Service is undergoing, includes assessing its organizational culture, meaning the values, beliefs, and behaviors that shape how members do their work and interact with the community. Members of the public are invited to share their views either by attending a series of roundtable meetings, which are listed on the website, roundtable discussions, or by filling out an online survey so they can participate in the assessment process. The service hired MNP, a Canadian professional services firm, to complete the organizational cultural assessment and facilitate the roundtable discussions. As I mentioned, for more information on the online survey and where and when the roundtable discussions are happening, please visit the Toronto Police website's news release section, which details all of these issues, and the release was made public on January the 12th. Let me move on to the regular business of the meeting, and that is item number 4, the confirmation of minutes of the board meeting held December 14, 2017. Councillor Lee seconded, Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. We have a present, sorry. Okay. Thank you. So moved by Ms. Muller, seconded by Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lee. No. It's we have a number 5, a deposition and a presentation. Number 6, there is a deputation, so we'll hold that. Number 7 is the City Council's motion, the Toronto Police Transformational Task Force report and the impacts on city divisions. Motion to approve.
No, I need to ask a question.
Okay, held for Councillor Carroll. Yep. Item number 8, which is second City Council motion, the operating variance report of the 9 months ended September 30th, 2017. A motion to approve. Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 9, the contribution to OAPSB's review of Bill 175, the Safer Ontario Act. A motion to approve. Ms. Mulliner, seconded. Mr. Jeffers, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 10, there's a deputation, so we'll hold. Item number 11 is the supply and delivery of Goodyear Automotive tires. A motion to approve.
I'd like to hold that.
Okay,
Short
hold
question.
it by Councillor Lee. Item number 12 is the special constable appointments, the Toronto Community Housing Corporation. There is a motion or a deputation there, so we'll hold it. Item number 13 is Technion Limited, furniture vendor of record. A motion to approve. Ms. Mulliner, seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 14 is the facility security professional services vendor of record. A motion to approve. Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay, thank you. Item number 15 is the site selection for the consolidated 54-55 division facility. Okay, so Councillor Carroll will hold that. That brings us back to the item number 5, which is the presentation of and the Deputy Chief McLean and the Human Resources Command. We're going to do that.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to introduce this very quickly because I got some very smart people who've been leading this initiative who will actually provide the meat of it. But I want to, as they get the presentation up, just talk a little bit about process. We consulted with over 200 members of our organization, different ranks, different classifications, different roles within our service, as well as quite a number of our community partners, advocates, critics and residents to get to the two products that we're going to speak of today. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Today we are just about a week shy of when we introduced our final report last year, the Transformational Task Force, and which has subsequently been adopted as our business plan. Today is a really important day because it's evidence that we are moving from recommendations to actual implementation. And these are two key initiatives that will actually support the implementation of our business plan. You'll remember that recommendation 30 within the way forward spoke to the need of, if you're going to have a modern police service, you need a modern HR function. And then the next slide will remind you very quickly that in October, we came to you with our HR strategy, a plan to restructure our HR function, as well as the transformation roadmap. And today is the first major deliverables of our people plan, these being our refreshed core values and our competency framework. And their delivery is timely because we are starting to embed them in some of our HR processes, and specifically they have informed our hiring process for 80 new recruits, as well as some of the key strategic civilian roles that we have identified. So going forward, they will anchor actually our other HR initiatives outlined within that roadmap, and become the foundation of what is expected of our members and our leaders. So presenting these core values and these competencies today are Gloria Packervan and Sherry McKay. And I want to thank them for co-leading this project, and I think you will be impressed with what they have to show you. So take it away.
Thank you. We are thrilled to be presenting to the board Toronto Police Service's values and competencies today. To begin, I would like to provide the relationship and definition of the core values and competencies. Core values are the beliefs that are shared by all members. They are the intangible and define what is important. They are that place that we go to when we need to make hard decisions. Competencies support the core values by providing observable behaviors at the operational level. They demonstrate what successful performance looks like at each rank and role. Why did we require core values and competencies at this point? As identified in the Way Forward recommendations, Toronto's neighborhoods have gone through dramatic changes, and the service needs to keep pace to ensure that it is innovative, affordable, and sustainable. Our modernization plan is based on the principles of being accountable and trusted, transparent and engaged, inclusive and collaborative, and affordable and sustainable. And at the heart of our modernization efforts are the communities that we serve and the partners that we support. All of these qualities need to become part of our organizational fabric. This is where the core values and the competencies come in. They will ultimately shape the organization's culture and will define what organizational and individual success looks like. How does this look like at the individual level? Well, there are two dimensions to high performance, successful performance. The first dimension is the what, which is the technical function of the job. This could be when a police constable investigates a neighborhood crime, or when one of our members of the records management team receives a request for a criminal records check. The technical piece is extremely important, but high performance requires a second dimension, and that is the how, which is the values and the behaviors that influence how the job gets done. Did that individual collaborate, or did they work in a silo? Did they look to use technology and modern approaches to doing what they do, or did they just do what's been done in the past? This is when the how influences the what and ensures success at the individual as well as the service. I'm now going to ask Staff Sergeant Sherry McKay to provide you with an overview of the process that we use to develop these competencies and what they are.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, Deputy. When we began this journey, one thing became clear is that our competencies and our values needed to reflect who we are and who we wanted to be as an organization. They couldn't be generic and imported from one organization and just plopped into our organization as the Toronto Police. To help us with this mandate, Korn Ferry Hayes Group was procured through an RFP process. And I want to thank Korn Ferry Hayes Group, they're here today. We heavily consulted with the way forward. We also looked at our core values and competencies of other organizations across the globe. More than 40 strategic interviews were held with leaders across the service, as well as interviews with the board chair and its members and external partners. And I thank you to the board members who were part of that process. In addition, 15 focus groups were conducted with members from all ranks and all commands across the service. It was through these discussions that the core values and competencies were developed. They were also vetted by members from across our service for language to make sure it was something that we understood and could be endorsed and believed in as an organization. They were further reviewed by our CPLC members at meetings across the city, our PACER group, and our key partners. And our thank you to our Nia Singh, who's here today as well, for being part of that. In all, over 200 members of the service and at least 100 members of our community were active in building these core competencies and core values. And here's our final product. You'll see in this crest, in the middle we have our four core values. On the outside, there's the four competency themes, and with each have two competencies that are attached that are theme-based. Our core values include service at our core, connecting with compassion, do the right thing, and reflect and grow. What supports these values and their definitions are four questions that members need to reflect on as they represent the service both on and off duty. Have I done all that I can do? Have I treated others the way that they would like to be treated? Have I lived up to my word and values? And what else can I do to improve? We had 8 total core values prior to today. You will see that in all 8 of our previous values are represented in the new core values, particularly the freedom from bias value. That value you will see represented in each of the new 4 values. Our competency framework. These are the behaviors that support the behaviors that support the core values within the competency framework are: we are adaptable and forward thinking. We are solution focused. Those relate to our mindset. We are service and community focused, and we work collaboratively. Those relate to our connections. We develop ourselves and others, and we lead and inspire. That's about our development. And our impact is that we are emotionally intelligent and we are accountable and deliver results.
These competencies and core values are to be embedded and become the foundation of human resources functions. They will be the basis with which we select, develop, recognize, promote, and evaluate our members. To date, we have incorporated the competencies into the recruitment process and have trained all employment and background staff in using the competencies. And as the deputy mentioned, they in turn have been used in the selection of the 80 new recruits as well as key civilian roles. Police college leads have also been trained on the competencies and are currently looking at ways of incorporating them into their curricula. Today, an intranet site was launched that provides greater details on the competencies to our members, as well as development resources and tools, including e-learning courses, podcasts, and development ideas. A 360 feedback tool is currently being piloted that allows leaders to request feedback from their own managers, their peers, as well as their subordinates and any external partners that they're working with, to see how they're doing against the competencies, to build greater self-awareness and understand where to focus their development efforts. Competencies and values are currently being embedded and rolled out in our new performance management process, which starts this month. A peer recognition program is being developed for 2019 and is focused on people who demonstrate these values. And finally, we have developed a comprehensive communication plan that will take us to the next year to fully embed these competencies within our organization, including quick reference cards, decals in different parts of the buildings that we are in, competency and/or value of the month. As you can see, a busy year to come for us. And we commit to providing the board with continued updates on the progress of these two very important initiatives. To end our presentation, we would like to show the board a video that has been developed as part of our communication to our members about what these core competencies and values are all about. As you can see, this is the internet site that was launched about the competencies today.
The Toronto Police Service is transforming, and you are showing us how. Since February 2017, we've met with over 200 members of all ranks and roles, and with individuals and community groups. We asked our members and our communities to help us define what modernization looks like. We asked about our values and what brings us together as the Toronto Police Service. We asked how we might shape modernization by defining the behaviors that demonstrate the very best of our colleagues, our leaders, and our service. You and your peers told us, service at our core. Asking ourselves, have I done all I can do? Do the right thing. Asking ourselves, have I lived up to my word and values? Connect with compassion. Asking ourselves, have I treated others the way they would like to be treated? Reflect and grow. Asking ourselves, what else can I do to improve? It is through these values that you helped us define what will bring us together as a service, what will help us make good decisions, and what will guide us in our daily roles. Our members represent a vast array of technical skills that enable them to do what they do day in and day out. Technical skills are important. They support the what of our daily activities. By helping us define our values, you also told us what behaviors we should expect. And these support the how of our daily activities. These behaviors are represented in our new competency framework. Our mindset: we are adaptable, innovative, and forward-thinking, open to and positive about change. We're solution-focused, critical analysts who make the best decisions. Our connections: we are service and community-focused, demonstrating an active commitment to serve. We work collaboratively, building and maintaining partnerships. Our development: we develop ourselves and others. We lead and inspire, creating a positive work environment. Our impact: we are emotionally intelligent. We strive to understand ourselves and others. We are accountable and deliver results with integrity and ownership. These behaviors represent what you, our members, and our communities identify as the very best of our service, our leaders, and our people. Now, we're calling on you to demonstrate them every day. And we promise to apply these behaviors when we hire, develop, promote, and evaluate our members. We created it together. Now, let's live it together.
So before we answer any questions, I would like to thank the Korn Ferry Hague consultants who are in the audience today, Dr. Andrea Plotnick, Alyssa Marquette, and Martina Baker-Son. They have expertly guided us through this process, which we believe will have a positive impact on the future of policing in Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think before we get to questions, we've got 4 deputations that we'll hear from. So if I could ask you guys just to stay close by. We'll hear from the deputants, and then we'll bring people back for questions. The first deputation is from Kevin Vaughn. Not here, okay. Next is, there is attached in your package is a summary of his points. It's in your yellow package, colleagues. Second is Miguel Avila Valerde. I see you. Happy New Year, Miguel. Welcome.
Happy New Year to you as well.
And you've got 5 minutes.
And congratulations.
Thanks, old pig. You still got 5 minutes, Miguel.
Okay. I live in Regent Park. Everybody knows it. In case you don't know, I live in Regent Park. We are meeting lately as neighbors of the community, members of the TCAC residents, and members of the condominiums. These are people who are owners of condominiums and live in a community. We have discussed the issue of safety and policing in our community. We don't want to be anti-police. We want to be pro-community policing. There is an article that is posted in our bulletin board that I'm going to distribute to members. Please and thank you. I'm going to pass it around. Thank you. Thank you. I would appreciate if you guys can dedicate some time to read this story. It comes from the States, another jurisdiction that are doing some improvements to community policing. The city here in the story is Camden, New Jersey. Due to changes in community policing, they have improved dramatically their core values and enhancements. Watching the presentation, I do agree with many of the objectives and goals, but I didn't see nothing that relates to reduced costs and reduction of liabilities that adds up to the budget of Toronto or the city of Toronto. Liabilities caused by members of the force who are, and those are the reasons that we don't change, because we keep keeping the same persons, people, employee and the community knows it. The community understand that these are illness that needs to be removed, some viruses that are destroying your image. Okay, so going back to the story, I'm gonna read to you a paragraph. In 2013, the Camden Police Department was disbanded, reimagined, and born again as the Camden County Police Department, with fewer officers, lower pay, and a strategic shift toward community policing. Look what's going on now. Camden is now something of a showroom for community policing techniques. Officers are trained to use handguns and handcuffs only as a tools of last resort. To increase accountability, members of the department are equipped with GPS tracking devices, and many wear body cameras that were designed in 2016 with community input, so important. The impact of body cameras on police officers is disputed and inconclusive, but the hope is that they encourage officers not to use force unnecessarily. Going down, there's a question here. How that people in my city measure public safety, if not a piece of paper, is by what they sense when they open their front door. So when you are asking members of police to change their attitudes and behaviors, I had to say that the only change that can happen is when we are able to remove those officers. And that's something that the Ontario Safety act will make it happen, because it's something unattainable, unsustainable, and we can't build bridges if we had these people. Thank you for 1 minute notice. So, in view of our large crisis of opioid crisis in the city of Toronto, I want to reduce the amount of money that we are dedicating to the police force and dedicate it for our social issues that affect the city. In conclusion, I wish you well in your endeavors in this project. I know it will take a lot of political will. And Mayor Tory, if you're thinking of running again, you have to put your stamp on this Move Forward campaign. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel.
Any questions?
Any questions? I do that part, Miguel. Okay, thanks, Miguel. Derek Moran.
Just one thing about the presentation, I noticed it didn't mention, it could have mentioned that all Toronto police officers know that the Crown is the surety for the person we all have. That's just a thought.
I've started you, Derek. You've already started.
Just a thought. So
5 minutes, you'll get a 1 minute warning.
So I just wanted to come here and speak to the record on what I expect police officers to know in order to be competent to do their jobs. So I've come here before and I've shown the Police Officer's Manual by Gary P. Rodriguez with a small book with a purple cover. So I took a scan of the page that tells police officers, explains to them what the rule of law actually means. Rule of law is a legal principle of general application sanctioned by the recognition of authorities that is usually expressed in the form of a maxim or logical proposition. It is called a rule because in doubtful or unforeseen cases, it is a guide or norm for a decision. And at the very bottom of the page here, I'm not going to read the whole thing out. I'd like if I had 10 minutes. It says the law must apply to everyone equally, including those who wield authority. And now I know people are probably thinking, what exactly does that mean? Who are the ones who wield authority? I put something together here. I'm going to give it to Carlene after I'm finished. This is from the reference regarding the secession of Quebec, 1998. Supreme Court of Canada said, paragraph 66, "It is, of course, true that democracy expresses the sovereign will of the people." 85, paragraph, "The Constitution is the expression of the sovereignty of the people of Canada." Paragraph 123, with little formal elaboration of the definition of peoples, the result is being that the precise meaning of the term people remains somewhat uncertain. Notice that your bylaws apply to a person and not people. And this is from Yick Wo versus Hopkins from the U.S. Supreme Court from 1886. "Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. But in our system, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts, and the law is the definition and limitation of power." And just because Mayor Tory is here, I'm going to repeat this one part over again. By whom and for whom all government exists and acts. And then in Black's Law Dictionary, 9th edition, it defines the adjective where sovereign was used in regards to sovereign will. Characteristic of or endowed with supreme authority. Will is defined, the first definition, defined as wish, desire, and choice. So it must be a great honor and privilege to have us, the people, come and grace this board meeting every month with our presence. You have 5 minutes to explain just how special that is for you afterwards, Chair Pringle, but I just also want to point out that, actually, Ken Jeffers here a while back was enlightened enough while speaking to someone with his 5 minutes. I forget exactly what the content was in which it came up, but he brought up the conspiracy or conspiratorial nature of the criminal justice system that's discussed by some people out there. So Section 1 of the Criminal Code says this act may be cited as a criminal code. In the Dictionary of Canadian Law, the first definition given for the word act is a statute. Now, here's the problem with the criminal code most people don't realize, and it can be figured out by following along with this Supreme Court of Canada case, Tropwood AG versus Savaco Wire and Nail, 1979. Canadian maritime law means the law that was administered by the Exchequer Court of Canada on its Admiralty side by virtue of the Admiralty Act or any other statute. This definition of Canadian maritime law in Section 2 refers to the law that was administered by the Exchequer Court by virtue of the Admiralty Act or any other statute.
1 minute, Derek.
The reference to Admiralty Act is undoubtedly to the Act of 1934, but the Admiralty Act of 1891, although it was repealed, may certainly be considered as any other statute. Remember, criminal code, an act. An act is a statute. Any other statute. Maritime law, any other statute. Maritime law is the jurisdiction that applies when one is on the water. But here in reality, Ontario is a common law jurisdiction where the rules of equity apply also on dry land. No water. Everyone see the problem now with acts and statutes, and in this case, the criminal code? So for example, when Councillor Carroll recently tried to explain to me how the Police Services Act somehow gives you all special magical authority powers compared to the City of Toronto Act to restrict what we, the people, are able to say here, my response to that is, oh, that's nice, but what does your boat law have to do with me?
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. Colleagues, any questions for Derek? Okay, thanks, Derek. Brenda?
Thank you, Derek. Congratulations on your re-election. I was very
Thank-
worried, and I'm so happy about it.
Thank you, Brenda, and happy New Year. And
Happy
welcome.
New Year to you. The best chairman there has ever been, and we knew them all. Norm Gardner, Mrs. Prinsloo, Mrs. Ang. I'm so happy that you're the chairman, so happy that Mr. Lee is again vice chair. So getting
Thank
to
you,
the
and
point of the
welcome.
core values.
Yep.
You're welcome. Core values. It's one thing to talk about the core values, and it's another thing to carry them out. And my concern is what has been happening in the last few weeks. I guess the only way that Deputy Chief Barbara McLean is going to see her wishes come true is if she walks out of her house tonight, looks up at the sky, and wishes upon a star. Because otherwise, I don't see how we're going to succeed. Miguel is absolutely right. We're proceeding with the same rotten apples, and no one's stopping them. And from the top down, we have a problem. And what is the problem? The deputy and the people with her are saying, treat others as you would like to be treated. I would like that engraved on everybody's head. Treat others as you would like to be treated, because that does not happen. The rudeness is appalling, and the mannerisms, the way of speaking to people that are handicapped, crippled, poor, different in some way is appalling. So all of this is very interesting, and it's nice that these ladies have helped with the core values, and it'd be even nicer if we had these core values. But we don't have these core values, and I call upon the deputy chief in her new position to pay attention to what I'm saying, because no one ever has. Now recently, I made a serious complaint before this board regarding a very senior officer that works with the chief of police. And so far, nothing's come of it except this. I'm going to read this in my 5 minutes. Carlene, I need a favor from you. I didn't have a chance to photocopy this, couldn't get to the printing shop, and I'm going to ask that after I hand it in, that you make a copy for the members of the board as a favor to me. And I promise not to let this happen on a regular basis. So basically, here's what happened, ladies and gentlemen. Talking about honesty, integrity, and accountability, I'm going to say, where is the honesty, integrity, and accountability? Because I haven't seen any sign of it. So on January the 15th, 2018, I was again at 13th Division to meet a very senior officer. He's named in this handout, but I don't want to say it before the camera. The detective refused to sign acceptance that I was handing him a large package of documents to prove what I was saying was true. And he looked at me and said, he doesn't want them. And I said, sir, here they are. I was told to deliver them, and I have. Can you please sign an acceptance sheet that you've received? And he refused. He then asked me if he could tape record the interview. I agreed, but I have no way. I have no copy of this tape. I can't prove that I gave him a large envelope filled with documents. Some of those documents I've handed out here. I assume that most of you took them and threw them in your garbage can. I don't know if you really read them. I know that the chairman reads them. I know Mr. Jeffers reads them. I know that certain members of the board read them, but I don't believe that everybody does. And to me, they were very important about problems in the police force that need to be addressed. This laughing at people when they speak and calling names and paying no attention to their complaints and treating them as if they were a pile of living garbage is not acceptable. The Deputy Chief McLean's got a huge job before her. I don't know how she's going to do it. I hope she succeeds, but I don't think so. Not with the people that we have running the show. So I'm going to call upon our new chief to speak to his senior officers about their bizarre behavior, which is appalling. So this is how we end it. I'm going to ask Miss Carleen Bennett, if she will please make sure everyone gets a copy. It explains what happens, and it gives a copy of the list that is not signed because of the refusal. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to you and saying that all of this negativity in our force has got to stop. Asking our chief of police to speak to his senior officers. I'm sure that Carleen Bennett will give him his copy, and I want to know how, again, after all the talking here, I've been sitting here for how long listening to the way forward. How did this happen to me again? Why? So, Carleen, can I call upon you to please do this for me? Thank you so much.
Brenda,
Mr.
thank you.
Jeffers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Brenda, colleagues? If not, thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Carleen.
Deputy McLean, could I ask you and your team to come back? And I'm sure there will be some questions of colleagues here. So, colleagues, a fulsome presentation. We've had a number of depositions. Other questions? Councillor Carroll.
Okay. Yes, well, I asked this question because it's a while now since we first had a presentation on this. I'm going to be moving a motion as new business later on having to do with workplace sexual harassment in the current climate. I think it bears reporting, and I think it needs to be a standalone report. But I wonder if you wanted to comment on it in the context of this competencies exercise. We already had policy, but how are those being imparted to new recruits coming in and to people who will be taking the new competencies process? And as a result of going through it, and as a result of the societal change that's happened while you were doing this exercise, is there anything more that we need to do?
I'll start with the development process. So when you think about how we developed it in combination, in cooperation, and I'll use the word in partnership. We didn't just ask our members, what does good public service or what does good policing look like to you? We actually went out to the people who receive the services, and we didn't just ask those who are positive about what we do. We actually invited some of our critics to provide their perspectives as well, to inform our entire process. And when you think about that, that was a real change in how we have done things in the past, in partnership, inviting those who are critical of us. And it isn't leadership saying to our organization, this is what you will do because this is what we think you should do. This is our members and our public telling us, this is what we want you to do. This is us saying, these are the standards by which we want to hold ourselves accountable, because this is what excellence looks like to us. And you'll see the transformation roadmap. It always was planned to start with the competencies because they are so important. So if you think about building a house, we've just poured the concrete because they're the foundation. They're going to anchor what we do going forward on that transformation roadmap. But through that process, we realized that we needed to also refresh our core values because they really do go hand in hand, and that was slated for a little bit later. And that image of the transformation roadmap, while we're highlighting these two, other ones are currently under development. They're just not at a point where we can, give you something substantial yet. But they are informing a lot of our decisions. So to get to your question of whether it's workplace harassment or any other social issue that's facing not just the Toronto Police Service, but any organization, we have defined the behaviors that we want to hold ourselves accountable to. We are starting to embed them in our decision making, who we hire. We've promised to embed them in how we develop our members. Sherry and Gloria mentioned a 360-degree evaluation tool for development that we are piloting based on these competencies, so we can kind of think about how we are demonstrating them now. And what that does is it actually causes people to think about going forward how to demonstrate them. And when you look at the core values tool, we have reflective questions attached to each, which we haven't had before, so that they're more instructive in the moment. So these are the things that we are going to be embedding in all of our HR practices going forward.
Mr. Jefferson.
A number of the presenters have articulated their what I will interpret as a conflict with personal value systems sometimes and core value systems of the police services. Two questions. Do you measure or evaluate the personal value systems of particularly of current members of the service, and to determine whether it's in conflict with the modernization, as you've presented, value systems here, right? And if so, how do you address that? Because, the current members of the service will have entrenched systems, value systems, and they may need to be changed from what you hear all the presenters are saying. So how do you deal with that?
So, when we built our current values, the ones that we presented today, they weren't built, how should I say it, in a bubble outside of how our organization works. When our Korn Ferry Hay group conducted a lot of the focus groups that we were in, the questions weren't about your current value or your individual value systems. They were more about what attracted you to come to Toronto Police, to get at the heart of when they started. What was that? And it wasn't about since then what has happened. It's more of taking you back to that place that attracted you to Toronto Police. And those values that came out in those discussions were, I wanted to be of service to other people. I wanted to help other people. I wanted to do the right thing. So these were our members from all ranks, from all roles, talking about the values that they had when they joined Toronto Police. So it's not been made outside of those values. These are our members' values.
Yes, well, the thing is that, we know that there are inherent biases with each and all of us. And the reason I'm asking this, because, with the modernization objectives of the TPS, if the, current values are not consistent with what you expect, then they either have to be corrected and managed.
Yep.
And so, and I'm assuming that members of the service that will understand that they have to keep up, quote unquote, with the times.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, then we can help you. And if help, then what are the consequences for failure to meet those values?
So that's where we are incorporating the values in the new performance management and performance evaluation system, as well as our promotion system and our recognition system. It's through those that we're going to be saying, these are the values and competencies and behaviors that matter. These are the values, behaviors that the Toronto Police expects of you. And these are the values that we will help you develop against if you want to grow within this service.
I'm just going to add to that. So first off, I'm looking right at him. Nia, I thanked you during the presentation and you weren't here. Thank you so much for your input. Part of that input we got from our board members and from our members of our service is we heard people have a definition in their head of what a good police officer looks like, what a good boss looks like. And it wasn't really truly defined. We knew what it wasn't. We certainly knew what it wasn't because comes in complaints and different matters, but we wanted to know what it was and what it was that would look modern. So this process of being able to define it gives not only everyone in our organization at the various levels those expectations. This is what a good boss looks like. This is what I expect of my boss. This is what our members said they want for their bosses. So once those expectations are out there, being able to evaluate against them, people know what they're looking at.
The thing is that, you know, the community also has expectations, right? So, you know, the core values from the TTF were based also on community's expectations of what will constitute a good police officer, all of that, right? So, when someone comes with the inherent biases or has been here for a number of years and as I said, entrenched in these values, the measurement is not, as we've said in the TTF, not only internally evaluated, but externally as well, because every 3 months, as you know, from the TTF recommendations, the community or neighborhoods have an opportunity to do that. So I'm just trying to understand if there's a conflict in the values, what measures you take to correct it.
So I think that there's internal measures, and that's the performance evaluation process. But we as HR will be looking at other measures. Are complaints regarding behavior going up or are they going down? Where are we seeing these issues? What kind of support will we need to provide our members and our leaders to be able to handle certain issues? As data and analytics is playing a greater role, we will be able to then support our specific areas and specific needs with that kind of training, development, evaluation, and as well as look to see if there's something specific that we need to do for.
I'd just like to add too that these are two important deliverables, but they're not the only part of our people and culture transformation. Gloria mentioned data and analytics, so we're going to be looking at using technology, dashboards, those types of people dashboards. We look at our 7 major crime indicators and other types of dashboards. What I will be doing is adding the people side of that analytics and improving that over the next little while throughout my tenure. And then the other piece too is, if you'll remember, in October we talked about a new HR structure, and what we're adding is a business partner function, which is brand new to our organization. So business partners who are embedded within all aspects of our organization, who understand what we do and can help with managing some of the complex people challenges that we are experiencing right now, part of which is all that. So you can't take these in isolation, but there are other supporting systems that are coming as well.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Mulliner?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I was one of the board members who was very pleased to participate, and my heart goes out to you as the folks working on this, because as one of my close friends says, there are PPTGs in all of our lives, personal practice theory gaps, where your personal practices and your theories just don't align quite yet. And I appreciate very much that this is the foundation. I'm interested in knowing how you ensure, because if it's the foundation, every single member has to buy in, that before you move into the next steps, you have achieved at least that foundation level where every member, because 200 people is less than 5% of the service, and that wasn't even just service members. How will you know that you're ready to say, okay, I think we are moving in the right direction? Because everything you've presented, who could argue with it? We aspire for it in all of our organizations. The board could adopt this kind of culture competency framework willingly, but it's in the execution and the accountability, which I think is some of what I'm hearing, that we really, really need to have confidence that you feel you're making inroads. Because this week's been a tough week, and last week in the media, and so the dissonance, the PPTGs are very tangible to me today. So I'm interested in knowing how you'll know when you really feel, and I guess I'm looking at you, Deputy McLean, that you're getting some traction.
Sure. I would love to say that we would embed these in the next my apologies. I would love to say that we can embed these and in the next 6 months, everybody will know it and own it. But culture change doesn't work that way. This is at least a 5 to 10 year process. So our leaders need to own and understand this and start embedding it within all that they do. Our people need then to also understand it and start looking at our leaders who demonstrate it as well. So, the first thing that we are doing is, as of January, we are starting our new performance management process. But we're only focusing on the leadership level because they need to own and understand this. If they don't own and understand this, they can't expect their employees to own and understand it. As we slowly roll out the performance management system, at first it's a knowledge thing. Our first year, it's about understanding the competencies. Next year, part of your evaluation is going to be how effective have you been against these competencies. So we're going this year from a knowledge perspective. Next year, part of what your rating is your understanding and demonstration of these competencies. Eventually will be leading to a point where 50% of your evaluation is what you do, and the other 50% is how you do it. So that's one aspect. The next aspect is our promotional process. When you come into an organization, your dreams and hopes are typically that you want to rise within that organization. So you will look to see what are those behaviors and actions that are evaluated, appreciated, are what we want within a leadership. We started our process, We started our process last year with our staff superintendent, and I would say around 60 to 70% of what we looked at in the staff superintendent promotional process were these competencies. So these were competency questions that we asked. How have you demonstrated these things in the past? Because we want people who will become leaders of this organization who will demonstrate it in the future. And what was done in the past is a reflection of what we expect in the future. So as we go through how we recognize our people, this will be another way that we embed. So it's not going to be a 6 month, a magic wand, and this is a 5 to 10 year process. And that means the HR team, the leadership team, has to own this for the next 5 to 10 years. 20 years ago, Toronto Police had competencies. Those competencies were, first of all, for uniform members only. And they really were only focused on during a promotional process. Today, we're saying that's not going to happen. That's going to happen in all the milestones of an employee's work life. It's who do we hire? Who do we promote? How do we evaluate them? What courses and what kind of development opportunities do we provide them? So every milestone, as the deputy mentioned, those business partners will be embedded in each of the business lines. They will be the ones to make sure, are these competencies and values being incorporated in the various, whether it's HR, whether it's our frontline policing, are they being embedded? So these are some of the tools that we will be looking and building. The other thing that, if you remember from our presentation in October, one of the things that we said was that the people plan every 3 years will be a new people plan, because we're going to be reflecting on what has happened in the past 3 years and the initiatives that we've developed to determine what was successful, what was not successful, where are we at in the organization, and what do we need to still continue moving forward. But all of those people plans will have one foundation, which is the core values and the competencies.
I'll just say something very quickly. But the value of making things real through dashboards. So, we're not just talking about absenteeism, turnover, things like that. We are actually looking at, in different areas of the organization, what are the competencies that are required? Are we there? Are there any gaps? How do we develop people? So, being both proactive and reactive, but the idea of measuring it and creating a picture of it for people that they can kind of see where they're successful, where they aren't. And what this also does by defining this is it also gives a little bit of the self-motivation back to people, because if people know what's required of them, one of our core values is, reflect and grow and take ownership for your own development. And we're giving people the tools of that. So we can't underestimate our members wanting to develop themselves for positions as well, if we give them that path.
Thank you, colleagues. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you all very much for an excellent presentation, a great deal of work done, and to the external providers, thank you, and Nia Singh, and all those who participated. We appreciate it. Any discussion, colleagues? If not, need a motion to receive. Ms. Mulliner, seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you all very much. Barbara, if you could make sure the entire team gets thanked on our behalf, we'd appreciate it. Great. Move on to item number 6, which is the City Council 2018 Shelter Infrastructure Plan and Progress Report. And there is one deputation, and that is Derek Moran. Five minutes, Derek.
So I don't know if anyone's brought up international law yet in regards to all this. And actually, that's your cue, Councillor Carroll. Okay, maybe just City Hall. Okay, so the Convention for the Amelioration of the Condition of the Wounded in Armies in the Field, Geneva, 22nd August, 1864 said, Article 5, inhabitants of the country who bring help to the wounded shall be respected and shall remain free. Generals of the belligerent powers shall make it their duty to notify the inhabitants of the appeal made to their humanity and of the neutrality which humane conduct will confer. The presence of any wounded combatant receiving shelter and care in a house shall ensure its protection. An inhabitant who has given shelter to the wounded shall be exempted from billeting and from a portion of such war contributions as may be levied. So this is a quote from an article I read in the paper a while back. The city is trampling on thousands of its citizens' human rights. By failing to invest in repairs to crumbling community housing stock, Canada is a signatory to these UN documents, and by doing so commits the federal government, as well as all subnational governments, including city governments. A country can't sign an agreement and then deliberately construe a way to avoid living up to it. Canada is rightly condemned for such hypocrisy, and so should Toronto Council and its mayor be condemned for their failure to meet their human rights obligation. This was written by someone named Alan Broadbent. What's the whole point of having an equity, diversity, human rights office at the City of Toronto if the City of Toronto has become a human rights violator itself? I mean, they're constantly looking to find savings there at the City of Toronto. Get rid of the Human Rights Office, as it would seem. They have no use for it since they're not following those rules anyways. And those international documents talked about, this is what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. Now, this is the International Covenant of, I think it's cultural, economic, social rights. Article 11.1, the states parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. The states parties will take appropriate steps to ensure the realization of this right, recognizing to this effect the essential importance of international cooperation based on free consent. 2, the states parties to the present covenant recognizing the fundamental right of everyone to be free from hunger shall take individually and through international cooperation the measures including specific programs which are needed. How much time do I have left?
1 minute and 19 seconds.
Now, I just wanted to point out, the first thing I mentioned, inhabitants, which is really a legal weasel word I don't consent to, of the country who bring help to the wounded shall be respected and shall remain free. I don't know if he needs it now, but Chief Saunders recently had a rather serious operation. I just happen to have kicking around the house an extra piece of gauze. He might not need it, but in the future, a Toronto police officer might, we all come down with bobos at some point. So let the record show that I'm going to give Tony, can you give this piece of gauze to Chief Saunders, just to put in the first aid kit, just to say I did it, okay?
You don't want a tax receipt, do you?
What's that?
You don't want a tax receipt, you're fine. Thank you for your donation.
It's a gift.
Thank you.
Okay, now in case anyone was ever thinking of taking the City of Toronto or the corporation of the City of Toronto operating as John Tory, that's something also I found on Dun and Bradstreet. To enforce these rights, Contract and Tort Law for Paralegals by Rock Olivo Fitzgerald, page 43. In most circumstances, the courts will not enforce gratuitous promises because they lack consideration. Gratuitous promises are not contracts. However, there are some exceptions to the rule. A gratuitous promise that is made under seal will be enforced even without consideration. A document under seal is called a deed. A deed is a written contract made under seal by the promisers, also called a formal contract. When a contractual promise is made by one party to another without any valuable consideration, a seal is required. A promise made under seal does not require consideration to make it binding. The courts have traditionally viewed the seal on a document as an indication that the promiser understands the significance of his or her act and intends to be bound by the promise contained in the document. The reason I'm saying this is that everyone hears the international covenants, this and that, but now you know what a covenant is. It's a document under seal.
Thank you, Derek. And I did give you 30 extra seconds for my interruption.
Because of the whole sovereign will of the people, supreme authority thing, right?
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Derek? Okay, Derek, thank you. Is there any discussion on item number 6? If not, may I have a motion to receive? Councillor Lee, seconded. Councillor Carroll, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. That takes us to Councillor Carroll. You were holding item number 7. That's the Transformational Task Force report, the impacts on the city divisions.
Yes. Just a quick question. I just had one quick question because I wanted to give the chief an opportunity, if he would, to address the concern in the discussion of this on the city side. What councillors fed back to us is that they're on board with the way forward as well. They just want to be assured that some of the things that the community expects, a traffic fatality in a neighborhood or a traffic issue may still require local divisions to send an officer along to a community meeting. Those types of local responses are still going to be possible while we're going through the transition. That was the only sort of outstanding concern we heard.
Just for the record, that has never changed. Whenever we do have town halls, whenever there are unit commanders that do present the town halls to their particular communities, one of the issues that is always directly spoken about is traffic enforcement, traffic issues, because we know that that affects every member of the community almost every day of their lives. So that is a priority, and it's also an opportunity to engage in a conversation with City Hall, since you are here, on leveraging technology to enforce traffic enforcement, so I can actually have my officers do what they're highly trained to do rather than sitting in stuck spots when we can utilize better safety with technology.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No other, sorry, Ken.
Yeah, just one quick question. When we look at the impact on the TTF on the city, apart from the traffic, the city division, what about the other divisions? How does that? Is there anything that stands out with that as well?
I believe that's a later discussion, but I can certainly touch on certain things right now, and Command is very aware that there are pressures with the front line right now as we move towards the goals and objectives that we're trying to meet with the modernization piece, and we have heard the front line loud and clear, and we're in the process of making some modifications and doing what we need to do to enhance the front line.
Any other questions, colleagues? If not, Councillor Carroll, motion to approve item number 7 it is. Okay, Councillor Carroll, seconded by Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 10, there's a deputation for, that is the request to review a complaint investigation pertaining to Policy Internal Police Service Professional Standards case PR 7067173. And the deputation is Michelle Chapman. Okay. Michelle, welcome. I'll give you 5 minutes, as we do everybody, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning and so please start to wrap up. Sorry, will you introduce yourself, sir?
Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Stephen Pottins, Pottins. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I am a lawyer in the GTA, but I'm not here because I'm retained particularly for this reason. I act for Michelle on a variety of matters. Michelle's quite nervous to speak in public, so she's asked me to help her out. So this is not supposed to be confrontational. A decision was made through a course of applications that Michelle made for employment at various agencies that she was not to be accepted. All of these applications connected through a police background check, CPIC, and the concern, which is in the very brief report that I gave you, is that not all bases were covered and not all proper explanations were provided for the decision. Michelle has impeccable references that are on the sheet. Michelle is a community volunteer with the police services and other agencies, Meals on Wheels, etc. She has her CPIC history shows no convictions. And the report, and I don't know if you have the background materials, but the report that generated the decision refers to her failure, the fail of the CPIC test. And I don't really understand for myself what that means. How do you fail that? You either look at it and make a decision, but there's no test for CPIC. It's just a report of your history and a lack of integrity. And she seeks or sought an explanation of what that meant, because since you cannot look behind the occurrence history of an individual under Bill 113, And because none of the references provided were contacted, she questions the policy and procedures of how this decision was derived at. Ideally, of course, she would like to have that decision reviewed with a proper investigation, including those references, and an explanation of whether or not those occurrences, which are not supposed to factor into the decision, have actually been taken into account. And she would like a written explanation of whether or not the process is documented and whether it has been adequately and appropriately followed. In her case. You're probably all aware that there's been litigation on this in the past. I don't think everybody is dealt differently. Everybody's circumstance is different. Michelle is only concerned about herself. She's had a very long dream of becoming a police services employee. This is a bit shattering to her. She's continuing to apply in other jurisdictions, but she wants to be a Toronto employee. So she's here to see whether or not the Toronto Police Service has adequately and appropriately followed its protocols, and to give her a proper answer on how her integrity has factored into a decision when there is no evidence that that part of the investigation was ever conducted. I'm done.
Thank you. It's a minute and 23 seconds under time. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Or Chief Saunders, is there anything that you want to? Let's, Councillor Carroll first, sorry.
Well, just to make sure that we're current, because I know the request came a few months before. What you've submitted today is dated January, and so to your knowledge, none of the references have still not been contacted. There is, at this time, still no conviction on CPIC.
Correct.
That's still the case? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? Chief Saunders, anything you?
I'll go through the board's guidance here. I mean, this is under in a legal environment at this point in time, and so I'm not sure if this is the forum or the location to start a narrative in a public forum on this very subject. And I hope the council, or I know you don't represent, but as an officer of the court, you would understand and appreciate that.
I do. Again, I'm only here to speak for Michelle, who's not comfortable with the environment. If it's escalated, of course, I may or may not be retained for something, but that is certainly not the intention to make this confrontational, just for an adequate explanation.
And I don't disagree with that, but I just don't think this is the environment for that conversation, and it's not the position you hold right now, but your knowledge that you have in law that would agree or disagree with that particular comment.
Joanne, have you got a suggestion?
The board has the option to establish a committee to deal with this.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Can I ask if we maybe want to stand that down and do that? I'm not sure if the deputants know, but we're in an unusual position today because we didn't finish our in-camera session. We will be moving back into camera. I'm wondering if we could move that we add this item to that afternoon in-camera session, because I have a couple of questions of the confidential materials before deciding on a motion to respond. Yeah, but I'm wondering if I could move it after that time. Would we have to then rise and report and have a public session after our in-camera session if to do that? Right.
So I think we could do that, and we would report out publicly, and obviously we would be required to notify the chief and the complainant of whatever decision might be made.
Right, right.
Do you wish to make a motion then?
Yeah, I would move that we add discussing this item to the in-camera items we're going back in camera for this afternoon. I think we have to do a motion to go back into camera. If we added this item, any recommendation could result from that discussion then.
Colleagues,
Yeah,
are you
yeah, so
comfortable
at
with
this
all of
time,
that?
we would just receive the public deputation. Yeah.
Colleagues, comfortable? Seconder for that then? Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. So, John, the procedure would be that we would go in camera, we would hear it, and then we would come back, how to the deputant and,
We would come back at whatever time the board has made its decision. So whether that is today or at the next board meeting, it doesn't necessarily have
allow
to be
us
today.
to discuss it now, it's more likely you'll get a faster answer, if that's all right.
Sure. We're in the board's hands.
Any other questions, colleagues? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That takes us to Councillor Lee. You held item number 11. That's the supply of Goodyear automotive tires.
Thank you, Chair. Very simple question. I found out that the TTC don't rotate the tires. Does police cars rotate the tires from winter to summer?
You mean from summer to winter?
Summer to winter and winter to summer. I
No,
mean,
we don't.
So you keep your winter tires on all year round?
Yes.
This for cost savings, right?
They're seasonal tires,
Yeah.
and it's to cost savings in terms of actually replacing the tires, but
Yeah.
also storing the tires.
Right, and storing it as well, two sets of tires. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'll move the...
So Councillor Lee has moved item number 11. Is there a seconder, Ms. Mulliner? Thank you. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. That takes us to item number 12, where there is a deposition again, and that's Brian DeMattis. Is Brian here? No? Okay. Do we have his, yes, we have a brief note you'll see from Brian on your yellows. Is there any discussion on item number 12, that's special constables at Toronto Community Housing, et cetera? If not, may I have a motion to approve? Mayor Tory, seconded Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried, thank you. And now there is, Councillor Carroll, you've held item number 15 as well. This is a site selection for 5455.
Yes, yes. Just a quick question here, because it came up in budget discussion at final budget wrap-up. I just wanted to make sure, I had already read this report, but then on Friday morning, one of the councillors asked there, I think Mr. Veneziano might have been in the room then, one of the councillors was asking that there remain, while we're choosing the site, and there's a budget mentioned here and a cost or upset cost, but she mentioned that discussions weren't finished yet on how many services might share this site, if it was going to be, done in the hub model. If we adopt today, is there still that flexibility, or do we need to add a clause to this to make sure that there is that flexibility?
So the site is at Danforth and Coxwell. It's actually already occupied by the TTC, who have existing needs plus future needs. There's a public library on the site, there's a heritage component to the site, and certainly our needs combined with the TTC's needs will not occupy the whole site, so probably there's about an acre and a half for community programs to also go on that site, which really would result in a beautiful hub model that I think would be good for us and the community as well.
But we could proceed with our piece, and then if Section 37 allowed for something to be added to it, the councillor could do so.
So we're working with city planning, who really is going to lead this process.
Yeah.
There's a master plan study that's currently underway, but we'll work with them as well as city real estate, who have been very helpful in actually identifying the site, and we'll be moving forward accordingly. This is a really important milestone for us in terms of actually getting this site so we can actually get moving on the part of what was the Way Forward report in terms of modernization, reducing our facility footprint, but also providing services in a better way.
as you say, the site itself fits ideally within the transformational task force in community engagement, in working with others, all of those things.
Yes, the site is actually right in the middle of the catchment area
Yeah.
for the site, and certainly meets our needs.
So it's perfect.
I just have one comment,
Certainly, shoot.
unless anybody else has questions. I just wanted to go on the record, and Mr. Venetiano will remember this as well. I just want to go on the record that we don't end up what we need to do, getting the 54-55 division up and running, that we don't get hamstrung. It's great that a counselor mentioned wanting this to be a hub and adding things, and she sort of threw out there that she had Section 37 and such. And it made me think of the time long ago when we could not get going on the building of the college because we had innocently said, yes, we will join in with the Department of National Defense and eventually build this college when your $10 million arrived. And then we waited 3 years for that check and couldn't proceed. So the hub model's great, but we are proceeding on the timeline of the need for the division. If there are funds available, we'll do it. If not,
That's a great point.
got to move on. Mr. Veneziano is asking for a motion, and I
think that's-
really think it is a good idea.
Then
So if
do it.
I may,
I
I'm
agree
going
with
to
you.
add a part 3.
Okay, please do.
And I'm sorry, Carlene, that I didn't write this out in advance, but I think it's important that that in the recommendations we add that the Toronto Police Services Board adds that the chief be mindful of the service needs and timeline for the amalgamated Division 55, and that not be hampered by community ambition for the future. We have to keep to the service need timeline. Yeah. Okay.
Give Carly a minute.
Oh, sorry, of the service need timelines to amalgamate Division 54 and 55, and that any community hub ambitions need to align with our service need timing, is the best way to put it.
With our service. Needs timeframe.
That the chief makes a great, with our service delivery model.
As our service delivery model.
Yes, it's excellent.
And, right after 55, we need the A and. And the D there, and the A, right there, yep. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the motion before us all. Councillor Carroll, you're putting that forward together with the whole motion encompassed in item 15. Is there any further discussion, colleagues? Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Carroll, that's great. Second of all, Councillor Carroll, again, this is kind of your dominated meeting. Under other business, you have an item you wish to bring up.
I do, and I submitted it earlier so that it could be typed up. I think it's going to appear on the screen there momentarily. My fellow members might remember that I mentioned this in the media a couple of weeks ago. There's a human rights complaint tribunal that was in the media a couple of weeks ago, and it has to do with sexual harassment in the workplace. We don't know what the outcome of that will be. That's for OHRC's tribunal to decide. But those take a very, very long time, and to my mind, that news media story came at this very, volatile tipping point time when #MeToo. This is very much in top of mind for everyone in the community, and so when I was asked to comment on it, we don't comment on a case like that once it's started process. But what I did say was we don't have to wait for the outcome. Something that may take 3 or 4 years. So what I'm asking for here, just to give some comfort to the community, is that we get a report letting us know currently what does go on in terms of the ongoing efforts to make sure that that service members are mindful and adhering to our workplace sexual harassment policy. It's embedded in the occupational health and safety policy, which is quite a large policy. But just to get an update on those efforts, and also upon reviewing it, Part B is simply if the chief wants to, upon looking at it, recommend when it next needs to be reviewed. Has it been reviewed recently, and should it be reviewed in the new community context? Because I think we can all agree the community context around workplace and sexual harassment now is zero tolerance. But there's a much more demanding feeling about what that means. Zero tolerance is a nice term we like to use, but if 1,000 complaints came forward, or even 100 complaints came forward, and you sort of dismiss 75 of them saying, how about you go back to work and don't ruffle any feathers? If that in fact is happening, we don't know that it is, but if that were happening, that's not 0% tolerance, that's in fact 75% tolerance is what that is. So just to have a review of where we're at now, I think is important in the community context. I've suggested March, but if the chief has a problem with March, the following month would work as well. Yeah.
Lost the technology.
Oh, we've lost it. So
just
to
reading
reiterate,
your,
it's that Chief Saunders be requested to report to the board in March regarding ongoing efforts to ensure that the section of the Ontario Health and the occupational, I should say, health and safety policy called workplace and sexual harassment is adhered to by all members of staff, uniform and civilian, and that Part B, when he might recommend the next update and review of such policies, should be to ensure that they align with the current community expectations of zero tolerance.
Any questions, or Chief Saunders, any comment?
Yes, if we could bump it up to April, and I understand the spirit in which the issue is being brought up. I just want to make sure that it doesn't create the connotation that there is no ongoing training when it comes to that subject matter, that there is continuous, right from the employment level right through to supervision from all ranks, all levels. But to put a comprehensive report in to state that, I certainly would be willing to do in April, sir.
I have no problem with change. I even put it in brackets because I wasn't sure, but because we have a lot going on right now. So to April is fine.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Councillor Carroll, any other comments, colleagues? If not, Councillor Carroll, that's your motion. Is there a seconder? Ms. Mulliner? All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you, everybody. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Jeffers, I thought you would get it. Well, it's recess to go in camera, I guess, this really is. So Ms. Mulliner, seconded by Mr. Jeffers, all in favor, any contrary? Thank you. Thank you, everybody.